Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. It started with a strange letter demanding my house keys from an HOA I didn't even belong to. Days later, strangers broke in claiming emergency rights. What followed was a wild descent into fraud, surveillance, and the downfall of a suburban empire. They messed with the wrong neighbor. I never expected my peaceful home on the hillside to become a target for an HOA I didn't even belong to. It was a quiet Thursday morning, 2 days before my flight to Vancouver, and I was wrapping up a client deployment from my home office when I noticed a manila envelope wedged into my mailbox. No postage, no delivery slip. Just a logo in the corner. Saguaro Pines Estate HOA. My stomach dropped a little, not out of fear, but annoyance. I already knew where this was going. Inside was a neatly formatted letter titled, "Request for Temporary Access, Vacation Safety Compliance." The tone was polite, but the message was insane. The board of the HOA was kindly requesting that I drop off a copy of my house keys, both front and back doors, at the HOA office for emergency access purposes during my absence. The letter ended with a warm thank you and a map to their Dropbox, as if this were the most normal request in the world. Now, for context, I don't belong to Saguaro Pines HOA. I never did. My property borders their development, but it's entirely separate. My parcel predates their subdivision by decades. I've got a full copy of the survey and deed to prove it. Still, I'd heard from a few neighbors that the HOA's president, Karen McNaughton, had a habit of including homes that weren't technically under her domain. I'd even heard stories of her asking for lawn service fees from homes a block outside the border. I figured if I ignored her, she'd get bored and move on. I drafted a short but firm response, attached copies of my property records, and dropped it off at their office myself just to be sure it reached them. In my note, I stated clearly that I was not a member of the HOA, I would not be handing over any keys, and that future communication should be routed through legal channels only. I kept it professional. I'm not the kind of guy who looks for fights. I just don't appreciate being handled like I'm part of someone else's rule set. That night, I uploaded both the original request and my response to the neighborhood forum I frequent, mostly other IT freelancers and mountain folks like me. I titled the post, "HOA tries to collect house keys from non-members. Is this normal now?" The replies came flooding in, some horrified, some laughing, and a few warning me to be careful. Apparently, Karen had a bit of a cult of personality, and she didn't like being told no. The next day, things got weirder. Around noon, I was working from the patio with my coffee when I noticed two men I'd never seen before, standing at the end of my driveway. Both had matching polo shirts with the Saguaro Pines logo embroidered on the chest and cheap sunglasses straight out of a gas station display. One of them was holding his phone vertically and filming my front door. The other paced slowly along the gate, pausing occasionally to zoom in on my mailbox, porch light, and camera system. I stood up and called out, "Can I help you, gentlemen?" One of them responded without missing a beat. "Routine HOA documentation." "Nothing to worry about, sir." I took a few steps toward the gate. "This property is not under your jurisdiction. I already responded to your president." He shrugged and kept filming. "Just making sure the property is secure before your trip." "Leave," I said calmly but firmly. "Now." They didn't argue. They turned, muttered something to each other, and walked back toward their truck, which, by the way, also had a magnetized HOA logo slapped on the side. I watched them drive back toward the development like nothing had happened. No shame. No hesitation, as if this was part of a regular checklist. I texted my brother Miles that night. He's an attorney in Phoenix who's used to HOA drama, and when I told him what happened, he immediately replied, "Do not leave that house unattended without full monitoring. They're testing the fence." That phrase stuck with me. Testing the fence. Like they were poking the edges to see what they could get away with. Still, I had everything set up. Motion sensors, interior cams, tamper alarms, and an external monitoring service with instant notification and dispatch. I even had backups in case the internet dropped. I triple-checked everything before I went to bed. The next morning, I left for the airport at 5. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was leaving something exposed. But I also couldn't cancel a long-awaited trip because some HOA weirdo thought my house was her summer timeshare. I should have known it wasn't over. The flight to Vancouver was smooth, but I never fully relaxed. Even as I checked into my hotel and unpacked, I kept checking my phone like a man waiting for a bomb to go off. I had alerts set up on my home system, motion sensors, interior mics, camera feeds, all of it routed through a secured app. First night, nothing. Second day, quiet. I started to think maybe I'd overestimated how far Karen would go. Maybe she got the message. Then I woke up on Sunday to 6 missed notifications from my security company and a voicemail from the Pima County Sheriff's Office. The message was calm, professional, and utterly surreal. Mr. Rhodes, this is Deputy Klein with Pima County. We received a welfare check request from the Saguaro Pines Homeowners Association citing a concern about possible animal endangerment at your residence. Officers made entry after failing to confirm interior safety via visual inspection. If you have any questions, please call us back at the number provided. Animal endangerment? I don't own a dog, a cat, not even a damn fish. I was already reaching for my laptop, pulling up the security feed from the night before. The first alert came in at 9:41 p.m. 3 individuals approaching the side of the house with flashlights, not uniforms, polos again. One of them kneeled and started working on the rear lock. The second alert showed the rear door opening at 9:47. The third feed, 2 men entering my kitchen like they were checking into a rental. I tapped into the audio log and heard one of them mutter, "Told you the back door was easier." Another responded, "We're only supposed to be here overnight." Karen said 24 hours, max. My coffee went cold in my hand. I scanned forward. More footage, one of them pulling a duffel bag upstairs. The other sitting in my living room scrolling through his phone like he paid rent. I called the sheriff's office immediately. A dispatcher confirmed that officers had visited the house, but were told by HOA representatives that the homeowner had pre-approved temporary access. I barked, they broke in, I didn't approve anything. I've got video, timestamps, and a goddamn door lock log that shows forced entry. The line went quiet for a second, then the dispatcher calmly said she'd notify Deputy Klein and elevate the matter to a supervisor. I could feel the cold rage building behind my eyes. I caught the next available flight back to Arizona. By the time I landed, it was late evening. I didn't even go home first. I stopped by my brother Miles's office. He reviewed the video footage with tight lips and silent nods. When it ended, he looked at me and said, "You realize this is beyond civil now. They committed felony trespass. And if they changed the locks, that's constructive eviction. This is textbook criminal. We printed everything. Stills from the videos, footage timestamps, lock logs, even a screen grab of the guy scrolling on my couch." Miles handed me a manila folder. "You're walking in there with evidence. If the cops hesitate, you shove this under their noses." When I finally arrived home just before midnight, my front gate was unlocked, my motion lights already on, and the rear door had a brand new lock, one I didn't install. There was a light on in the upstairs guest room. I took a breath, pulled out my phone, and dialed 911. "Pima County, what's your emergency?" "Yes, this is Daniel Rhodes. I am the legal property owner of Address. There are unauthorized individuals inside my home. I believe a break-in has occurred. I have video evidence. I am outside, I am not armed, and I'm waiting for law enforcement. They told me to wait in my vehicle." I backed up slowly, parked at the edge of my own gravel driveway, and kept the dome light on. 2 squad cars arrived within 10 minutes. I stepped out with my hands visible, documents in one hand and my phone in the other. The first officer approached. "Mr. Rhodes?" "Yes, sir. I've got identification and proof of ownership right here. The people inside are not guests. I have video of them breaking in through the back." Another officer was already heading around the side with his flashlight. The first one scanned the documents, his expression tightening when he reached the HOA letter and the time-stamped camera logs. Then the radio crackled. "We got 2 males inside. They say they're security detail from the HOA." The officer looked at me. "You authorize that?" I let out the sharpest laugh I've probably ever made. "Absolutely not." "Copy that," the officer said into his radio. "Requesting them to step outside. Detain for questioning." It took less than a minute. The 2 guys walked out looking like they'd just been caught crashing a wedding. Both wore HOA shirts. One had the gall to ask, "Is this really necessary?" The officer responded, "You're occupying a residence without owner consent. You're lucky you didn't get shot." They tried to argue, said they were following orders, that Karen had the authority. The officers separated them and started asking for identification, permits, anything that gave them a legal basis to be in the house. They had nothing. I was finally allowed inside. Everything felt off. Things had been moved. My office door was ajar. There were water bottles on the kitchen counter that weren't mine. My books were stacked differently. One of them had even used my razor and left it wet in the bathroom. That's when I saw the envelope on the kitchen island. HOA letterhead. Inside, a handwritten note that read, "Temporary custody assumed for security per HOA bylaws. Thank you for your cooperation." No name, no signature, just audacity. The two men stood there like squatters who didn't realize they were squatters yet. One had the nerve to ask the deputy, "Is this really necessary?" As if they were being inconvenienced by being removed from a home they didn't own. The deputies were surprisingly patient, more than I would have been. They separated the two, asked for IDs, and started checking their names through dispatch. I stood on my porch, arms crossed, watching the whole circus play out under the floodlights. My own house, my own driveway, and somehow I was the one who had to prove ownership. I pointed to the door frame. That lock was changed. I have the original in my garage. The deputy nodded. "We'll want that for evidence." He walked me back inside. The place felt wrong, violated. It wasn't trashed, but it had that unmistakable sense of being lived in by people who didn't belong. A crumpled burger wrapper in the kitchen trash, half a soda left on the bookshelf in my office, the toilet seat up in the guest bathroom. That's when I noticed the black duffel bag by the back door. I unzipped it and found a set of labeled folders, each one with an address and dates written in pen. Some were mine, most weren't. HOA watch logs, apparently. But this wasn't security. It was occupancy tracking, like a timeshare schedule. I showed one of the deputies. He frowned and asked me to bag it. "We'll need that." Outside, the second deputy was asking the guy in the towel about a so-called mandate from the HOA. He kept referring to something called the Emergency Access Initiative, claiming it gave the HOA rights to temporarily occupy unattended properties adjacent to the community during heightened safety alerts. It sounded made up because it was. The deputy asked, "Do you have any written authorization for this property?" "No, but Karen told us it was standard." "Do you have a contract, an agreement, anything signed by the property owner?" He hesitated. "Karen said it would be fine." "Yeah, Karen says a lot of things." When the IDs came back, it turned out one of the guys had a record, trespassing, 2 DUIs, and a suspended private security license. The other was clean, but both were cited on the spot for unlawful entry. The deputy warned me that pressing charges would require follow-up with the county attorney, but the report would be filed. I told them I would be pressing charges. They handed the men formal no trespass notices and escorted them down the drive. I stood on the porch as their truck disappeared into the night. It should have felt like victory. It didn't. Once the cruisers were gone, I pulled the ladder from the garage and removed the new lock. Then I reinstalled my old deadbolt. Yes, I still had it, and double-checked all the internal locks, cameras, and sensors. I sat down at the kitchen table and started typing up a timeline while the details were still sharp. I compiled the videos, audio files, lock change logs, and screenshots into a single encrypted drive. I also scanned the handwritten HOA note they'd left. No signatures, just bold, permanent marker arrogance. By 3 a.m., I had a complete incident dossier. Miles would take it from here. Before going to bed, I logged onto the same neighborhood forum I'd posted to earlier and uploaded a short post. Update: HOA broke into my house while I was gone. 2 men removed by sheriff. I'll be pursuing charges. Lock your doors. I signed it off with, "Not kidding anymore." By noon the next day, Miles had everything organized. He drove down from Phoenix himself, folders in hand, calm but tight-jawed. When my brother's jaw tightens, someone's getting sued. We met with a detective from the County Property Crimes Unit, a sharp guy named Rodriguez who looked too young to be running felony investigations, until he opened his mouth. He flipped through the documents we brought, reviewing the security footage and voice clips like he was assembling a case in real time. When he reached the part about the fabricated HOA letter left on my counter, he froze. "This signature line," he said. "You know who Ethan Travers is?" I shook my head. Should I? "He doesn't exist. We've had HOA cases before. That name pops up when they want to sound official but have no legal backing. He's a ghost attorney." Miles leaned forward. "You're saying they made him up?" "Not just made up, used across multiple neighborhoods. A sort of HOA boogeyman. Only this time they used his name to justify breaking and entering." Rodriguez took the bag with the duffel full of property folders and told us he'd be launching a criminal investigation immediately. It wouldn't just be trespassing anymore. Now we were in the realm of forged legal documents, identity fabrication, and impersonation of authority. While Miles handled the formal filings with the district attorney, I turned my attention back to Karen. I hadn't heard from her directly since this circus started. No apology, no email, not even a passive-aggressive reply on the neighborhood forum. But that silence didn't last. That night, my neighbor Patricia texted me a photo. It was a flyer taped to every mailbox in her cul-de-sac. Title: Community Safety Alert regarding recent events. Below it, a blurry security cam still of me walking toward the two intruders with my phone in hand. Beneath the photo was a paragraph claiming that I was a hostile actor with a dangerous attitude toward neighborhood security efforts and that I had publicly refused community cooperation that could endanger local safety. The flyer warned residents to report any suspicious activity involving the Rhodes property and ended with a quote, "Good neighbors share, bad neighbors threaten." There was no signature, of course, but we both knew who wrote it. I stepped outside and found one taped to my own mailbox, fluttering slightly in the breeze. I took it down, folded it once, and threw it in the trash. Then I checked the security footage. Sure enough, someone had walked the whole road at 5:27 a.m., taping the flyer silently like it was a covert military op. Hoodie, gloves, ball cap, petty? Yes. Illegal? Not quite. But it was the next move in Karen's psychological game, and I'd seen enough. The next morning, I met with a journalist. Miles set it up. Some contact from law school who'd gone into investigative reporting and had a serious hatred for overreaching HOAs. I gave him everything: the footage, the fake documents, the emails, the duffel contents. He listened, scribbled notes, and finally said, "Jesus, this is a damn racket." He was especially interested in the name Ethan Travers and the idea that HOA boards might be recycling fake lawyers to intimidate homeowners. He said he'd seen similar cases brewing in Nevada and Utah. That night, the article hit online. Title: The HOA that tried to steal a house and the fake lawyer behind it. My name was redacted. Karen's was not. The next day, my inbox exploded. First, 3 emails from neighbors I'd never spoken to, thanking me. One of them attached a scanned letter they'd received months ago from Travers, warning of fines if they didn't repaint their shutters. Another sent me drone footage of HOA volunteers walking onto properties during holiday weekends. Then came an anonymous tip. The email simply read, "Check your house history. Your address was listed on Airbnb last year." Listing name was Desert Peace Escape. Owner T. McNaughton. Karen's husband, T. for Thomas. The Airbnb listing was still live when I opened it. It was under a host named T. McNaughton, based in Tucson. Photos looked eerily familiar. The living room staged almost identically to mine, with the same couch, the same bookshelf, even the throw blanket I thought I lost 6 months ago. Only difference, different angle, cropped out identifying details. The title read, "Quiet Desert Retreat, Bordering Protected Wildlife. Nightly rate, $275. My house, my land, my furniture." I stared at the listing for a long minute, then copied everything: screenshots, host ID, contact info, metadata. I forwarded it to Miles. His reply came in under a minute. "We are filing wire fraud and real estate misrepresentation charges. Forward this to the detective, too." Detective Rodriguez was just as stunned. "They listed your property while you were living in it." Apparently, even while I was sleeping in it. By the afternoon, a subpoena was already drafted for Airbnb records tied to that host account. But we didn't have to wait long for the next twist. Another neighbor and an older guy named Walt stopped by with a printout in hand. "Figured you might want to see this," he said. "It's a rental agreement. Karen asked me to sign it last spring. Said it was a mutual benefit pilot program. I didn't go for it." The paper was titled Temporary Property Stewardship Authorization. It was formatted like a real legal agreement, complete with fake clause numbers, but what caught my eye was Clause 5B. Saguaro Pines HOA reserves the right to access, maintain, or offer the property for verified short-term emergency residence or protective tenancy at its discretion. Protective tenancy. I nearly laughed. They made up a phrase just to justify squatting. Walt leaned on his cane and looked toward the ridge. Never liked that woman. Knew she was too slick, but no one wanted to challenge her. We all just wanted peace. That peace was gone now. That evening, a black SUV pulled up near my gate. A man got out, camera in hand, and started photographing my house again. I stepped outside and shouted, "Hey, this is private land. Identify yourself." He raised a hand, totally unfazed. I'm with HOA Legal, documenting condition of the premises after non-cooperative behavior. You're trespassing." He snapped one last photo, got back in his vehicle, and drove off. Within the hour, I received a letter slid under my door. Unmarked envelope. Inside, another HOA notice. This one, a compliance warning. According to them, I had failed to maintain acceptable community relations and was subject to remedial review. The document claimed a vote would be held among all residents impacted by the road's property, with options including forced mediation, exterior inspections, or, absurdly, caretaker oversight. Caretaker oversight. The same language you'd use for an abandoned dog. I scanned the signature line. No Ethan Travers this time. This one was signed by Board Oversight Chair T. McNaughton, Karen's husband. There it was, plain as day. The whole thing was a family operation. Miles read the notice and started laughing. They're not even pretending anymore. They think if they say it in legal-sounding language, it becomes real. Rodriguez agreed. This just crossed into organized fraud. We're adding new charges. The next morning, everything started moving faster. Airbnb froze the listing after we submitted the report. County records showed that Karen had repeatedly registered homes on the fringe of the HOA as emergency use safe units. Most had no idea their homes were being offered behind their backs. At least 6 other residents were listed on the duffel bag logs we'd found. By noon, Rodriguez had a warrant. Not for Karen, not yet, but for the HOA office itself. A nondescript building behind the tennis courts, always locked with a keypad and surveillance cameras pointed in every direction. They executed the warrant at 2:30 p.m. sharp. Inside, they found rental contracts, lists of absentee owners, spreadsheets of revenue payouts, and a calendar that showed which houses were booked, when, and who handled access. The names McNaughton appeared on nearly every page. A locked cabinet labeled Legal Affairs contained dozens of folders, many addressed to residents outside the HOA. Some had names I recognized from the forum. Every folder had the same forged letterhead, same fake signatures. Rodriguez stood in the middle of the office and muttered, "This isn't just an HOA gone rogue. This is a real estate scam wearing a homeowners association mask." By the next morning, the fallout had begun. The raid on the HOA office hadn't gone unnoticed. Someone posted a blurry photo of the search warrant taped to the door, and within hours, the local Facebook group for Saguaro Pines turned into a digital courtroom. Some residents were furious, claiming they'd never authorized anything. Others still defended Karen, insisting it was all misunderstood community management. And then came the threats. I woke up to a dozen voicemails. 3 were from unknown numbers, all using the same line. "You're putting our neighborhood at risk. Back off." One just hissed, "We know where you live," and hung up. Cute. Real original. Then the power went out. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Arizona's grid isn't exactly flawless. But when I checked the breakers and saw the meter box tampered with, I knew it wasn't random. Someone had removed the external lock, flipped the main shutoff, and left a neat little sticker on the panel. Pending review, Saguaro Pines Infrastructure Oversight. They were still trying to act like they had authority. Still using those printed stickers like badges of power. I called the electric company and had a technician come out. He confirmed that the outage was manual, not systemic. While he was there, we noticed a second tamper attempt on my fiber box. Someone had tried to clip the line but got spooked or lazy halfway through. Rodriguez took more photos, filed additional reports, and told me, "You're now under coordinated harassment. Don't let your guard down." I didn't. I added a second layer of security cameras, rerouted the power feed internally to a hidden switch, and wired motion-activated spotlights around the rear perimeter. Miles offered to stay over, but I said no. I wasn't going to be run out of my own damn house. 2 days later, the next stunt dropped. Someone filed an anonymous complaint to Child Protective Services, alleging that my property was unsafe and may involve an unreported minor in danger. I don't have kids. Never have. The CPS agent who showed up looked almost embarrassed to be there. She told me off record that the report was vague and clearly malicious, but they were required to follow up. "Your name came up in a cluster of recent complaints," she said quietly. "You're not the only one." That afternoon, I received a certified letter, a cease and desist from the HOA's legal counsel signed by none other than T. McNaughton, J.D., except there's no bar number, no firm address, no legal standing. The letter accused me of defamation, digital libel, and malicious slander for participating in the news article. It demanded I take down my forum posts, retract all public statements, and issue a formal apology to the HOA and its leadership. I handed the letter to Miles. He laughed out loud. They're panicking. That evening, one of my hidden cameras triggered. A kid, maybe 16, hoodie, sneakers too clean, was slipping a note into my mailbox. I reviewed the footage. No tags on his clothes. Could have been anyone. The note read, "You should have just given them the keys. This could have been easy." I handed it to Rodriguez the next morning. He read it silently, then pulled out a file and flipped through a stack of similar notes. Same handwriting, same marker. Other residents got these too. He paused, looked at me and said, "One of the letters we recovered from the HOA office, it had a contact list with names and notes. Yours said, problem, escalate carefully, involve pressure." Pressure. I'd expected fraud, maybe some extortion. But this was targeted psychological warfare. And the worst part? It wasn't just Karen anymore. She had followers, true believers in whatever HOA fantasy she was selling. And they were treating my refusal to roll over like treason. Rodriguez confirmed that the DA's office was now pursuing the case as coordinated criminal harassment and conspiracy to commit fraud. Multiple charges, multiple suspects, and one sealed indictment, still under review. I asked him, "Is it Karen?" He didn't answer. He just said, "Stay alert. We're close." The phone call came just after noon. Rodriguez again. His voice was calm, but there was weight behind it this time. "We're serving the first arrest warrant today." "Karen?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Not yet. Her husband, Thomas McNaughton." I stood at my kitchen window, watching the breeze roll across the desert ridge behind my property. It felt too quiet for what was about to happen. "They're picking him up at the HOA building," Rodriguez added. "You may want to stay away for the rest of the day." I didn't listen. An hour later, I parked just down the road from the Saguaro Pines Community Center. The HOA building sat behind a row of ornamental cacti and a pointless little fountain that hadn't worked in months. There were already 2 unmarked sedans out front and a marked cruiser pulled up on the curb. From my spot, I had a clear view of the main entrance. Then I saw him, Thomas, stepping out in his usual cargo shorts and HOA windbreaker, clipboard in hand like nothing in the world could touch him. He didn't even see it coming. One officer approached from the left, another from the right, and within seconds he was in handcuffs. No shouting, no drama, just quiet protocol. I couldn't lie, it was satisfying. Within an hour, news of the arrest was all over the community thread. That same afternoon, an emergency HOA meeting was announced. Karen, still pretending nothing had changed, issued a statement claiming the arrest was a gross overreach based on fabricated claims from an outsider with no legal standing in this community. That outsider was me. But then something strange happened. People started pushing back. Under her post, dozens of comments piled up, not just from angry residents, but from former board members, neighbors who had kept their heads down until now. One woman named Gloria wrote, "I stepped down from the board last year when I found out Karen had registered my home as part of the temporary lodging program. I never consented." Another, "I asked Karen to stop harassing Mr. Rhodes and was told to mind my business. I should have said more." And another, "We were told the caretaker oversight letters were standard policy. I never saw a vote. I want my name off everything." It was like the dam cracked. People were finally speaking up. That evening, Rodriguez confirmed what I'd suspected. Karen was next. "We're finalizing the indictment. Charges include conspiracy, document fraud, unlawful occupancy, identity fabrication, and obstruction." "How long?" I asked. "Tomorrow afternoon." They arrested her in broad daylight at the emergency HOA meeting she had called herself. I wasn't there in person, but the video made its way to me within the hour. Karen standing at the front of the room in a cream blazer, holding court like a tyrant who thought the mob still feared her. She was in the middle of some speech about neighborhood resilience when 2 plainclothes officers entered the room. The microphone picked up every word. "Karen McNaughton." She froze. "Yes?" "You're under arrest for criminal conspiracy, unlawful entry, fraud, impersonation of legal authority, and obstruction of justice." A gasp rippled through the room. Someone started recording. She stammered something about her community mandate and board immunity. But it didn't matter. They cuffed her, read her rights, and walked her straight out through a stunned crowd of homeowners, some horrified, some cheering. Later that afternoon, Rodriguez called me. She's in custody. Interrogation starts tomorrow, but there's more. You've got additional civil grounds now. How many? I asked. At least a dozen. Damages, retaliation, privacy violations, lost use of property, harassment, and a couple of financial leads were following. Miles wasted no time. He filed a civil lawsuit against the Saguaro Pines HOA, naming Karen Thomas and 2 other board members who had signed off on internal temporary housing policies. The total claim, $1.2 million. The grounds: civil conspiracy, misuse of property, malicious defamation, and illegal profit from unlicensed short-term rentals. The lawsuit was accompanied by a motion to dissolve the HOA itself. And here's the twist: the residents supported it. At the next community vote, held under interim leadership, over 70% of current members voted to disband Saguaro Pines HOA. The reason? Abuse of power, misuse of community funds, and the secret rental scheme that had turned their neighborhood into a black market Airbnb cluster. Reporters started showing up. The local news ran a full segment with clips of Karen being arrested, intercut with footage of my house, my security cameras, and scanned copies of her fake letters. They called it the HOA that went too far. It hit the national news 2 days later. In the meantime, I stayed focused. Rodriguez handed over copies of the investigation report for my civil claim. Inside were emails between Karen and third-party booking agents, texts with her husband arranging cash pickups from guests, a full map of the HOA territory with handwritten notes, homes tagged as vacant, cooperative, or resistant. Next to my name, needs removal, problematic. I handed the report to Miles. "I want every penny," I said. "You'll get it," he replied. And then some. The courthouse was packed, not just with press, not just with lawyers, but with residents, neighbors, former HOA members, people I'd never met who had seen the story on the news and came to witness the implosion of the suburban dictatorship they'd once feared or ignored. Karen entered in a charcoal gray blazer like she was about to argue a zoning ordinance instead of facing 10 felony charges. Her face was tight, jaw locked, eyes darting just enough to betray the panic behind her paper-thin composure. Thomas sat beside her, already defeated. He didn't look up once. The prosecution wasted no time. They started with the paper trail, fake letters signed by Ethan Travers, the ghost attorney. Then came the caretaker agreements, the backdoor Airbnb listings, the forged authorizations, email chains, deposit logs, surveillance photos. Miles and Rodriguez had built a bulletproof wall of evidence, and every brick in it screamed fraud. But the most damning moments came from the witnesses. Gloria from the HOA board testified that Karen had intentionally misrepresented legal boundaries and board authority, convincing members that emergency protocols justified trespassing. Walt, the neighbor with the cane, took the stand next. He testified that Karen had offered him a cut if he allowed his property to be used during snowbird season. It was all about money, he said, not safety. Never safety. Another homeowner said she'd returned from a hospital stay to find strangers sleeping in her guest room. They said they were part of a community program. I thought I was losing my mind. Then came my turn. I walked to the stand, looked Karen in the eye, and told the court everything, from the letter requesting my house keys, to the break-in, to the threats. The night I flew home and found strangers in my house. The power cut. The CPS report. The note in the mailbox. I ended with the photo Rodriguez had shown me, the HOA internal memo with the words "needs removal problematic" scribbled next to my name. They didn't just violate my rights, I said. They planned it. Karen's attorney tried to claim it was all a miscommunication rooted in community good faith, but the judge didn't buy it for a second. He called it a clear and deliberate abuse of power cloaked in pseudo-legal authority. The verdict came swift. Karen McNaughton, guilty on all counts. Criminal conspiracy, fraud, unlawful occupancy, impersonation of legal authority, obstruction of justice, and multiple counts of retaliatory harassment. Sentence: 18 years in prison, no possibility of parole for the first 10. Thomas received 11 years, and 2 other board members accepted plea deals for lesser sentences. The HOA, once feared, was officially dissolved by court order that same day. I walked out of that courthouse not smiling, not gloating, just relieved. Finally, it was over, not just for me, for everyone they tried to silence. It took a few months, but the money came through, $1.2 million in damages approved by the civil court. HOA insurance covered part of it, what little they had left, and the rest came from the personal assets of Karen and Thomas McNaughton, their house, vehicles, bank accounts, all frozen, all liquidated. I heard Karen cried when they towed her Mercedes out of the driveway. That was the only time I smiled. I didn't blow the money. I didn't buy a boat or disappear into some mountain bunker. I reinvested into security, real security. I rebuilt the fence line, added biometric locks, upgraded every camera, and installed a perimeter system that would make Fort Knox feel jealous. My house now runs entirely off-grid with solar and backup battery power. I even built a storm shelter with a panic room inside, mostly as a personal joke. But it wasn't just about me. The HOA's dissolution sent shockwaves through the region. Other communities started asking questions. Other residents began checking their bylaws. And Miles. He left his job at the firm and started a small practice focusing solely on HOA abuse litigation. Within 6 months, he had 23 clients and counting. People who finally found the courage to say, enough. The empty HOA building was sold to the city and converted into a volunteer-run animal rescue center, a fitting repurpose for a place that used to bully people in the name of order. I still get emails, people who saw the case, read the coverage, or heard about the guy who took down an entire HOA. Some want advice, some want revenge, some just want to say thank you. I answer when I can. One day, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten, no return address. Inside was a single line on an index card. You didn't bend. You didn't break. You reminded all of us. I don't know who sent it, but I framed it. It hangs just inside the front door. And on the gate at the top of my drive, there's a new sign. Simple, clear, final, private property. No HOA. No exceptions. I haven't had a single unwanted visitor since.